Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds. Hang out with this nerd.
Ted.
Do your players invest in your game with player buy-in?
Jump down to the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy the newsletter, get weekly gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
I was thinking about something. Like, there's this whole train of thought I've been on recently, and we've done kind of a couple of videos around it. One of them just went up the other day, where we're talking about our GM plots, railroads was one of them, and we do so many videos, but there was another one too that was along this vein. It was all comes from a couple different comments that we've gotten in the comments section on several of our videos. One of them is the idea that GMs should be running sandboxes and everything should be kind of dictated by the players. But there's another concept that I was more recently introduced to, was the idea of player buy-in, right? I never thought in those terms over however long I've been playing the game and running the game. I was just felt like it was my job as the DM to provide a story, go with what other players are doing, and try and incorporate their backstories into the game.
Well, it really speaks to several layers of questions as both a player and a DM when someone is interested in running a game. And it has to do with multiple layers. You have to decide on how many people are going to be in the game. There are sometimes I've seen tables where you've got 3 or you've got all the way to 9 or more, and some people don't want to have the table that cluttered. I know I ran my game for a while with 9 players, and it's a big challenge because you don't know how many people are going to show up. That affects what the DM has to prepare for the evening, and it has to be on a sliding scale because you don't know who's going to show up. The theme of the game, the system of the game, as well as once you've made all your other decisions, are you, the DM, going to give the players any kind of input on what style of game you're going to run and what plot elements you're going to run? And I've run all kinds of games where someone, you'll throw out an online thing where, hey, I'm going to run this style game as a one-shot. Anybody want in? I'm going to run this style game with this rule set for a 4-session story arc. Who's in? So if you provide that type of information, it gives the players the ability to say, all right, I'm in on that or I'm not.
Okay, I was wondering where that was going. But no, you're absolutely right. By putting out the parameters of the game, then the players can get to make the decision whether they want to play in that game or not, whether they've bought into the concept of this game. Another place where one of the places where the player buy-in comes in too, and it could maybe even be its own video, but is getting the group together. And SR2 Joker, Andrew Knapp, and he's got his own channel as well as he runs tons and tons of games and has played in tons and tons of games online. You can find him all over the place. And I don't know if he still is, but for the longest time he was one of the admins over on the Facebook tabletop one-shot group. Right? Last
time I checked, which was within the last few weeks, he was still one of the admins.
Okay, so he introduced me to the concept of the players starting the game. So I'm going to make a point here eventually. But no, I've seen a DM in one of the comments angrily basically go, oh no, you're not a good DM if you can't get all the players together. Where I've seen Andrew go, why do I have to get the players together? Do you guys want to play the game? Why can't you guys just get yourselves together and decide why you would be together, why you're going to be involved in these stories, why you're going to be adventuring? Now we also see more and more roleplay games come out where they're that part is actually kind of built into the game, where you have connections between you and the other players as part of the system. And it makes sense, instead of going, instead of putting everybody together in a tavern, doing all these things to make them come together, which I've done, and part of me enjoys that. But it is, at the same time, it is kind of nice to go, oh, I don't have to think about this part of the game because the players are going to tell me how to do it. If you look at Dragonlance, War of the Lance, the Chronicles, the very first trilogy of that series, like all the characters, like it's kind of built like a D&D game in a sense, and that party, well, they all either knew each other or were acquaintances, and that's where it starts.
Correct.
So why can't your D&D game start the same way?
So there's a couple different points here, and if you're starting as a level 1 character and everybody decides that they're going to go crazy like I do and have this rich flushed out backstory, yes, there's room to say, all right, well, I encountered this person here and that person there. The higher level your campaign is starting at, I think it's easier to have these intertwining connections all the way to the point where it's like, oh, well, we actually adventured together. What I did as a backstory gets me to level 1. What I do elsewhere gets me everywhere else. So there's a number of different points that can be done to get the party together. I'm all for both sides. I've had times where I go through the work and put people in the right place at the right time. I've been a player in a game where the DM literally met with every single player and ran 1 to 3 sessions to get them to specifically where he wanted them so that everyone was in the right place at the right time. That, I think, is a painstaking amount of work and more than most GMs are willing to do, but it happens. And then I've had times where it's not worth the amount of work for me to gather everyone together and say, okay, well, this is how it all happened.
Well, I don't think you should say that. I don't think you should say it's not worth the amount of work.
That's true.
What you could say is, I don't have the time to do that, right? Like if you can run several sessions for everybody, that's fine. It's not a big deal. Go do it. But like for most people, especially if you're an adult in this hobby,
right,
with families and other responsibilities, you might not have that time. So
when that happened, we were all in college, so there was a lot of free time, and anytime you had 5-10 minutes, okay, well let's talk about this.
Right. So you could do all these different things to get the party together, individual sessions, whatever, right? But, even as the game goes on, having your players buy into the plot hooks you put out there makes it so much easier. And not only that, listen, anytime you put anything in the world for your players to interact with, that's a potential plot hook. So like when I hear a DM say, or another person tell me in the comments, you're railroading if you're using GM plots. I'm like, anything I introduce into the world is a potential GM plot. Like every NPC, every location, you control everything in the game that is not the player. So everything you do is a potential for them to latch on and decide something. The other route is you're going to just solely go off each player's backstory, and that's the only way you're going to generate adventures for the evening. What happens when that's the player that doesn't show up for the night and you plan for his backstory,
right.
Or some players just don't provide interesting backstories. I know, some are, I'm not going to play my game, or whatever. We just like to get together and play. We don't worry about the minutia of those things and let people enjoy the game the way they want to.
And there's some playing styles where the player says, well, what I did before isn't as important. I'll figure out my backstory as we play the game, because I'll just fill in details that make sense based on how I see this character evolving. And you see that kind of stuff in TV shows and movies all the time. You meet a character X at a certain point in his life. At that point in time, do you know everything that happened to him up till that point in time? Not exactly. You might know some things, but you don't know everything. So you have the ability to go into those movies and TV shows and build your character just like that.
Yeah, because we're creating fictional characters. Nothing exists until it exists, right? And so it doesn't matter whether you write it out now or you write it out as you go. And the other problem with the idea that you're going to only generate the stories based off of what your characters or the backstories is, if you have 5 or 6 players, like I have 6 players at my table now. It started as 7. And like I did actually work things in from their backstories and what they came up with, and like now like they're becoming engaged in this overarching story that is developed over the course of play. Some of it was stuff I put out there. Some of it was stuff that the players were interested in. But either way, there's other things for other characters that I haven't even touched on that I've wanted to do probably a year ago. But it's like where do you put it, right? And the other idea of I want to have a campaign that has an endpoint, right? It has a start point, it has an endpoint, and then we'll move on to a new game after this one wraps up at like level 20 or whatever. So it becomes very difficult to delve into each and every character, especially for us because we game once a month with our sessions. So the idea of a character-centric story all the time is very difficult. It's going to bog down the overarching story that all my players seem to be enjoying and have bought into, and they want to there's this problem they want to see solved.
Exactly.
And that's where you're at with player buy-in. You need them to go, okay, even if you were to take one of your characters or several of your characters and build your story around something they've done before the game started or as the game progressed, if those other players don't buy into that, it creates a problem, right? Are you going to run 2 sessions now? Do you split the party for everything?
The other situation is unless you're going to give each player their turn on, let's focus on this guy's story, you're gonna alienate players, and you're gonna have characters who are like, well, why can't it be about me? Why is George always getting it his way? Why is George getting the tailor-made magic items and the quests that are designed for his character? What about the princess that I wanted to rescue? What about, my grandfather's long sword that I wanted to have and it got stolen, or, whatever. And some people might not be able to come up with those things. They might be like, well, what about me? And they can't think beyond that.
Right. And then there's other people that just don't want to do it at all. Like, they don't care. They just want to come. They want to show up for game night, throw down some funny shaped dice. Maybe they role play. Maybe they don't. Everyone enjoys the hobby for different reasons.
Well, I feel the kind of player that wants to just show up, roll dice, and decide his own level of interaction at that night. He's going to be happy with whatever winds up transpiring. Well,
that's what I mean. But we've gotten the GM 911 more than once where I had this player that does, he seems to be having fun, but I want to make the story about their character once in a while. But, but you're not getting buy-in from that character on that level, so It doesn't matter.
Right, that's true.
And that's usually the advice we give. Well, if they're having fun, why mess with it?
Exactly.
So at the end of the day, this is a group event. Like, the idea that it's always all on the GM, to either, figure everything out and write the story, or dance like a monkey for his players whenever they play the music box and throw the peanuts at them. What I'm saying is I feel like there should be this middle ground where the GM introduces things either from the player characters' backstories, from things they've done previously, or out of his own imagination. And for you to have the most fun game, the players have to buy into it. Now, granted, Session 0 and social contracts can go a long way towards these, so this way everyone's kind of on the same page. And, you might have to revisit those and tweak things as you go. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of different ways to play this game, and everyone needs to pitch in to make it fun for everybody.
I agree. So, what do you guys think? What do you do to get player buy-in? You ever have any stories related to this? There's a perfect place for that. And that's down in the comments below. While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
You can hang out with us over on Facebook.
So until next time, stay nerdy.
Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds. Hang out with this nerd.
Ted.
Do your players invest in your game with player buy-in?
Jump down to the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy, the newsletter, get weekly gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
I was thinking about something. Like, there's this whole train of thought I've been on recently, and we've done kind of like a couple of videos around it. One of them just went up the other day, where we're talking about
what the DM has to prepare for the evening, and it has to be on a sliding scale because you don't know who's going to show up. The theme of the game, the system of the game, as well as once you've made all your other decisions, are you, the DM, going to give the players any kind of input on what style of game you're going to run and what plot elements you're going to run. And I've run all kinds of games where someone, you'll throw out
that I was more recently introduced to was the idea of player buy-in, right? Like, I never thought in those terms over, however long I've been playing the game and running the game. I was just felt like it was my job as the DM to provide a story, go with what other players are doing and try and incorporate their backstories into the game.
Well, it really speaks to several layers of questions as both a player and a DM when someone is interested in running a game. And it has to do with multiple layers. You have to decide on how many people are going to be in the game. There are sometimes I've seen tables where you've got 3 or you've got all the way to 9 or more, and some people don't want to have the table that cluttered. I know I ran my game for a while with 9 players, and it's a big challenge because you don't know how many people are going to show up. That affects
our GM. Our GM plots railroads was like one of them, and we did so many videos, but there was another one too that was along this vein. It was all kind of like comes from a couple different comments that we've gotten in the comments section on several of our videos. One of them is the idea that GMs should be running sandboxes and everything should be kind of dictated by the players. But there's another concept